Now, you might be thinking, what does losing a shoe have to do with Paris? How does that make sense? Stick with me, because I promise you, by the end of this story, you'll be questioning everything you thought you knew about fate, chance, and those odd little moments in life that somehow spiral into life-changing experiences. Trust me, this is a story you won't want to miss, a tale of how a simple, seemingly insignificant moment can flip your world upside down in ways you couldn't even imagine. Before we dive into the mystery, let me paint you a picture. Picture yourself in the middle of your busy morning routine. You're tired, groggy, running late for work or school, maybe even fighting traffic, just trying to get through the day. The last thing on your mind is any grand adventure or a magical moment. But then, something small and bizarre happens. You lose a shoe. It's not the most dramatic thing in the world, but it's enough to make you stop for a second, right? You might curse under your breath, feel a little embarrassed, and even wonder if you should just keep walking and pretend it didn't happen. After all, who's going to care if you're missing one shoe on a crowded train, right? But here's where it gets interesting. Someone notices. This person, who you might never have crossed paths with otherwise, decides to help. Maybe they bend down, pick up the shoe for you, or maybe they just give you a strange, knowing look as if they can see something about you that no one else can. And with that one small act, your life, your destiny, changes in a way you could never have foreseen. That's what happened to a woman I want to tell you about. Her name? Well, that's part of the mystery. We'll get to that soon enough. But this woman, just like you, thought she was having a regular, run-of-the-mill day. She didn't expect her life to be changed by a moment of carelessness, but it was. And that's the thing about life. Sometimes the most extraordinary things happen when you least expect them, when you're caught off guard by something as mundane as a lost shoe. Why did this person pick up her shoe? Why did they even care? That's the first question that's going to keep you glued to the screen, and as we unravel the events, I promise you'll start to piece together a puzzle that doesn't quite make sense, until it does. Let's get into it. The woman, who we'll call Emily for now, was on her way to work, just like most of us are on any given weekday. She had just boarded the train, one of those early morning rides where it feels like everyone's barely awake, shuffling into their seats, scrolling on their phones, and keeping to themselves. Nothing out of the ordinary. But then, as the train rattled along, Emily felt something strange, the unmistakable feeling of a shoe slipping off her foot. One moment, she was standing, holding onto the overhead strap, and the next, her shoe was gone. It wasn't some dramatic event or anything to panic about, but it did stop her in her tracks. She glanced down at the floor, half expecting to find it lying somewhere under the seat, but there was nothing there. A moment of confusion followed. She knelt down, awkwardly balancing on one foot while trying to get a glimpse of her missing shoe. The train was packed, and the floor was covered in the usual mess: discarded newspapers, spilled coffee cups, and forgotten wrappers. But there was no sign of her shoe. She looked around, hoping someone would notice her predicament and maybe help. But as the train swayed, she found herself feeling more embarrassed than anything else. Great, she thought. This is just what I need today. That's when she noticed him. A man sitting across from her, with sharp eyes and an almost too casual expression, had been watching her the entire time. He didn't seem to be in any rush, didn't look like the kind of person who would be paying attention to such trivial things. But there he was, his gaze locked onto her as if he knew exactly what she was thinking. And then, out of nowhere, he did something that would change everything. He reached down, picked up her shoe, and handed it to her without a word. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Most people would just thank him and move on, right? But Emily didn't. Something about the way he handed her the shoe was different. There was an intensity in his eyes, a look that said this was no accident. As she took the shoe, he leaned in just slightly, his voice low and direct. "I think you'll want to come with me to Paris," he said. And before she could even process the words, the train doors opened, and he was gone. Just like that. Confused and a little shaken, Emily sat there, holding the shoe in her hand, wondering if she had just dreamed the whole thing. Was this some kind of prank? Did he just say Paris? The rest of the train ride felt like a blur, and by the time Emily reached her stop, she couldn't shake the feeling that something very strange had just happened. Little did she know, that one brief encounter would set in motion a series of events that would pull her into a world far beyond anything she had ever known. But what could a random stranger on a train possibly have to do with Paris? Was this a scam? A trick? Or was it something deeper, something far more significant? And why did he say she was the one who needed to go to Paris? What did he know that she didn't? Here's where the real mystery begins, and you're going to want to stay with me as I reveal how this chance meeting unraveled into an invitation to the City of Lights, a city of culture, mystery, and unexpected connections. What Emily didn't know was that this strange man wasn't just any ordinary person. He was tied to something much bigger than a lost shoe on a train. And those words, Paris, were just the beginning of a journey that would change her life forever. But before I get ahead of myself, let's take a moment to think about how often life presents us with these odd, seemingly unimportant moments. A lost shoe, a chance encounter, an offhand comment from a stranger. They're the kinds of things we usually brush off, never thinking twice about them. But what if those moments aren't random at all? What if they're stepping stones on a path we can't yet see? Stick with me, because you're about to find out just how deeply connected everything really is, and how Emily's lost shoe wasn't just an accident. It was the key to unlocking a secret that would take her on a whirlwind adventure in Paris, filled with intrigue, mystery, and a whole lot more. And remember, this is only the beginning. What happens next? You'll have to watch to find out. The question remains, how does a lost shoe lead to Paris? And more importantly, who is this man, and what does he want with Emily? You're about to find out. Stay tuned. As Emily sat in the quiet of her apartment that evening, the weight of the day's events began to settle in. She still couldn't get over what had happened on the train, the bizarre encounter with the man who handed her her shoe, and of course, the chilling, cryptic invitation to Paris. The more she thought about it, the more she realized how little sense any of it made. Who was this guy? Why Paris? And what was she supposed to do with a single sentence that had rattled her world so completely? Emily sat there, staring at her phone, the hairs on the back of her neck standing up. She didn't recognize the voice, but she knew it meant something. Whoever had called her knew far more about the situation than she did. But what did they mean by dangerous? And why was someone so clearly warning her away from finding out the truth? It was becoming increasingly clear to Emily that she wasn't just dealing with a random stranger or a case of mistaken identity. There were people, real people, who had something to hide, and they were willing to go to extreme lengths to make sure she didn't dig too deep. Shaken, she turned back to her desk, where she had placed the photo of the mysterious figure in the background. But when she reached for it, the photograph was gone. Her heart stopped. She checked the drawer, the table, even the trash bin, though she knew she hadn't thrown it away. It was just gone. What the hell? She couldn't explain it. It wasn't like she had moved it. The photograph had been there only a few minutes ago. She thought back to the call she had just received. Was this some kind of warning? Did someone know what she had discovered and was now trying to cover their tracks? She couldn't sit still. Her mind was racing, and she needed answers. The first place she decided to go was the last place she'd expect to find any, Julian Harper's office. She hadn't seen him in person since their initial meeting months ago, but he had kept in touch over email about her recent project, and he had been especially persistent in praising her work. A little too persistent, she thought. She decided to pay him an unexpected visit, hoping he would be able to shed light on what was going on. Maybe he could help her make sense of everything. The sleek, modern building where Harper's office was located was nothing short of intimidating. As Emily stepped into the lobby, the chill in the air seemed to settle in her bones. She felt the weight of the building's cold, minimalist design pressing down on her, as if it were deliberately trying to keep her from the answers she needed. When she reached the receptionist, she was told Julian was in a meeting but would be available in a few hours. Emily hesitated but decided to wait. Something about the whole situation felt wrong, and she couldn't shake the idea that Julian knew more than he was letting on. Maybe he wasn't just a potential ally, maybe he was part of the mystery. Hours passed before she was finally ushered into his office. Julian sat behind a large, glass desk, his face breaking into a smile when he saw her. But there was something unsettling in his eyes, a tightness, like he was trying to mask something behind his usual charm. As they spoke, Emily couldn't help but notice that his responses to her questions felt rehearsed, as if he were carefully choosing his words, measuring every response. "Paris?" she asked, keeping her voice casual despite the tension bubbling inside her. "Why Paris, Julian? I don't understand. I've been getting these strange signs," and now she stopped herself. She wasn't sure how much she could trust him, or if it was wise to reveal everything she had found out. Julian leaned forward, his fingers lightly tapping on the desk. "Emily, sometimes the world puts things in front of us for a reason. We don't always get to understand why right away. But I promise you, it's all part of a bigger picture." His words were vague, like something out of a motivational speech, but Emily wasn't buying it. She pressed on. "Who's LB? And why was he at the shoot? I saw someone in the background of the photograph, and it looked like..." Before she could finish, Julian's demeanor shifted. The easy smile faded, replaced by something colder, more guarded. "You should drop it, Emily," he said, his voice low. "Trust me, it's better if you do." There was a finality in his tone that made her blood run cold. He was no longer the charming businessman she had met months ago. This was someone else entirely. Emily felt the walls closing in on her. It was as if she was trapped in a room full of smoke, and she couldn't see the exit, no matter how hard she tried. She wasn't sure whether she could trust Julian or if he was just another obstacle in a web of lies and deceit. But one thing was clear, there were people in her life who wanted her to stop digging. And the more she resisted, the more they seemed willing to push her into dangerous territory. Later that night, as Emily returned to her apartment, she received another email. This time, it was from the same anonymous account. The subject line read, "You're running out of time." The message inside was simple, "You're getting closer, but the truth is already being erased. Be careful what you ask for." Before she could process what she had just read, she heard a knock at the door. Her heart skipped a beat. Who could it be at this hour? She hesitated for a moment, and then opened the door. Standing in front of her was a familiar face, but not one she had seen in years. It was her ex-boyfriend, Alex. The last person she expected to show up. And he wasn't alone. As Emily stared at the scene unfolding in front of her, one thought burned in her mind. What had she really uncovered? And who else was trying to stop her from finding out the truth? The tension in the room thickened, and for the first time, Emily didn't know who she could trust. Alex stood at the door, looking more worn down than she remembered, his eyes tired but alert. He wasn't the same guy she had broken up with months ago. There was something in his gaze, something like urgency, that sent a chill down her spine. Before Emily could say anything, Alex stepped inside, as if he had expected her to let him in. She froze for a moment, unsure what to say, unsure whether to push him out or hear what he had to say. "Emily, I know this is the last thing you want, but we need to talk," Alex said, his voice shaking slightly. "I didn't want to get involved in this, but I can't stand by and watch you make the same mistakes I did." He closed the door behind him, his eyes flickering toward her, filled with a mix of concern and something darker, something he wasn't saying. For a moment, Emily was caught off guard. The last time she had seen Alex, their breakup had been messy, but it had been clear, they were done. She had moved on, or so she thought. But now, with him standing in front of her, the unresolved feelings and the tension from their relationship felt as fresh as if no time had passed at all. It was hard to tell what was worse, the fact that he was here or the way his presence seemed to make everything more complicated. "What do you mean, Alex? I don't want to get dragged back into this." Her voice was firmer than she felt, but she wasn't about to let him waltz back into her life, not when everything was so uncertain. "You told me you had nothing to do with any of this. You said it was over." Alex seemed to swallow hard, his eyes darting away from hers for a split second, and it was enough to make Emily's gut twist. There was something he wasn't telling her. She could feel it, thick in the air between them, but he wasn't ready to say it. "Not yet. That's the thing," he began slowly, as if carefully weighing each word. "I wasn't being honest with you, Emily. There's more to the story. More to all of this. It's not just some random coincidence that you've been getting these threats. That man you met on the train is connected to something much bigger, and I think you're getting too close to it. Emily's pulse quickened. She had suspected something like this for weeks now, but hearing it from Alex felt like the last layer of her world was being pulled away. You know him? She asked, her voice low, almost a whisper. Alex hesitated, and for a moment, it was as though he was searching for the right way to explain himself, or maybe searching for a way out. No, he said finally, I don't know him. But I know who he's connected to. I've been trying to keep you safe, but you're already in deeper than I ever thought. The email, the threats, it's all part of something I couldn't get out of. And now it's your turn. Before Emily could process his words, her phone buzzed on the table. The sudden noise made her jump, but it wasn't the sound that sent her heart into a frenzy, it was the notification. The email was from an unfamiliar address, and the subject line was unsettlingly familiar, "You're being watched." It's too late to turn back. She felt her breath catch in her throat as she read it aloud, her voice trembling. You're being watched. It's too late to turn back. This isn't about you anymore. It never was. You've uncovered too much, and now we have no choice but to make sure you stop asking questions. You're being hunted now, and no one can help you. Emily's hands went cold as she stared at the words, the weight of them pressing down on her like a physical thing. She looked up at Alex, expecting him to have the answers, expecting him to explain everything, but his face was as pale as hers. Something had changed in his demeanor, something in his eyes suggested that he had known what was coming, that he was all too familiar with the danger, but he wasn't ready to face it. Alex, what does this mean? What did you get me into? Emily's voice was raw with fear. Her heart hammered in her chest. She needed answers, but she wasn't sure who she could trust anymore. If Alex had been hiding things from her all along, who else had been keeping secrets? What was the connection between her, this unknown man, and Paris? Alex's expression grew dark. He took a deep breath, then spoke in a whisper, barely audible. The truth is, I never wanted you to get caught up in this. I thought I could protect you, but I was wrong. The invitation to Paris, the man on the train, it's all part of a game played by people who have power, who have influence far beyond what you or I can understand. I got involved with them a long time ago, and I thought I could get out, but I couldn't. They've been watching me for years, Emily. And now they've turned their attention to you. He paused, as if the weight of his confession had hit him hard. They know you've seen something you shouldn't have. You're part of the story now, whether you like it or not. Emily stared at him, her mind spinning. Everything she thought she knew, everything she thought she understood about her life, was falling apart. Alex, the man she had loved, the man who had left her months ago, was now telling her that he had been part of something far more sinister than she could ever have imagined. The threats, the strange events, they weren't just random. They were all connected. And now, for reasons she couldn't fully grasp, she was in the middle of it all. Before she could respond, the doorbell rang, cutting through the tension in the room. It was sharp and insistent, an interruption that felt out of place in the already heavy atmosphere. Emily glanced at Alex, who suddenly looked pale as a ghost, his face drawn with fear. Do not open that door, he whispered urgently. Please, Emily. If you know what's good for you, don't open it. But before she could react, the doorbell rang again, louder this time, and then she heard a muffled voice on the other side. Her heart pounded as she took a step toward the door, unsure whether to trust her instincts or the man standing behind her. When she opened the door, she wasn't prepared for what she would find. Standing there was someone she never expected, someone who should have been a distant memory. It was Julian Harper, and his presence at her doorstep, at this exact moment, was more than just coincidence. In his hand was a sealed envelope, and in his eyes was a look that told Emily everything. The game was only just beginning. But what he said next would unravel everything she thought she knew about herself, her past, and the people she thought she could trust. Emily, he said with a cold smile, I think we need to talk. Emily stood frozen in the doorway, staring at Julian Harper. His presence sent a ripple of fear through her body, a coldness that tightened her chest. The envelope in his hand was heavy with significance, its seal carefully intact, as though it contained the kind of information that could change everything. She could feel her pulse quickening, her breath coming in shallow bursts. This wasn't a casual visit, It wasn't a coincidence. Julian's smile, though polite, carried with it an eerie undertone, like someone who knew far more than they were willing to reveal. "I know this must be a lot for you to process, Emily," Julian said, his voice smooth, almost too calm. "But trust me, the sooner you accept it, the sooner this will all make sense. You have to stop running from the truth." His words seemed too rehearsed, too perfect in their delivery, as though he had been preparing for this moment for longer than she could have known. She could feel her gut tightening with every word, a knot growing tighter in her stomach. Was he trying to manipulate her? Or was he genuinely part of the mystery she was unraveling? Either way, he had to know something she hadn't pieced together yet. Before she could respond, the envelope was pressed into her hands. The weight of it felt almost symbolic, as if it held more than just paper. "Don't open it yet," Julian said, his voice taking on a sharp edge now. "Not until you're ready to face the consequences." She stared at him, trying to read his face. The man who had seemed so inviting, so mysterious and intriguing at first, now appeared nothing more than a part of the web she was tangled in. Every instinct in her screamed to turn him away, to slam the door in his face and ignore whatever he had to say. But she couldn't. Not yet. Not when there was so much she didn't understand. But as the seconds ticked by, that gut-wrenching feeling, the feeling she couldn't shake, began to spiral. What if everything was a lie? What if Julian wasn't the answer, but part of the trap? As the silence between them thickened, Emily finally spoke, her voice trembling slightly, betraying her internal chaos. "I don't trust you." Julian's eyes flickered with something between amusement and annoyance. "I didn't expect you to," he said, his smile widening just a fraction. "But trust me, Emily. If you keep pushing, you'll get yourself hurt. And there's nothing I can do to stop it." Before she could respond, she heard a sound from behind her, the soft creak of the doorframe, as though someone was stepping closer. She turned, but in that split second of distraction, Julian stepped forward, just close enough for her to feel his presence overwhelming her, closing in around her. The air felt suffocating. The heavy scent of cologne mixed with the unease that had begun to suffuse the room made her feel trapped, like an animal caught in a cage. But she had no choice. "What do you want from me, Julian?" she asked, her voice sharp. "What are you trying to do?" Suddenly, a loud thud came from the window in the other room. It was quick, sharp, startling. Emily flinched, her heart skipping a beat, but when she rushed toward the sound, she found nothing. The night outside was still, nothing but the gentle rustling of trees in the breeze. A feeling of dread began to settle deep in her chest. It was too quiet. The world outside seemed too calm, too unaware of the chaos that was slowly closing in on her life. When she returned to the door, Julian was gone. Just like that. Vanished. Emily's eyes widened in disbelief. She slammed the door shut and checked the peephole, but the hallway was empty. Had he been real? Had she imagined the entire encounter? It didn't make sense. She rushed to the window again, scanning the street below. No one. Nothing. Just the usual early morning quiet of her building's surroundings. But the envelope. The envelope was still in her hands. The seal. The weight. The threat. Her mind screamed at her to open it, to finally make sense of all of this, but something held her back. A voice deep inside urged her to wait. To be cautious. That's when she saw it. A black car, parked across the street. It had been there for a while, but now, for the first time, she noticed something strange. The tinted windows were partially rolled down. Someone was inside, watching her. She could feel their eyes on her, cold and distant, like a predator stalking its prey. Her hands trembled as she pulled the curtains back, but by the time she reached the window, the car was gone, vanished into the early morning mist. Her breath came out in short, panicked gasps as she stepped back from the window. She wasn't imagining things. She wasn't paranoid. Someone was out there, and they were watching her. The message in the email she had received earlier, the one with the warning that it was already too late to turn back, came flooding back into her mind. She had thought she was in control, that she could figure it out, piece together the clues. But now, she wasn't sure of anything. Was she the one being hunted? Or was she just collateral damage in some twisted game she didn't understand? Her phone buzzed again. A new message. She grabbed it, her hands shaking as she read the notification. It was from a new number, one she didn't recognize. Emily, stop. It's too dangerous. They know you're on to them. The envelope you have, it's the last warning. If you open it, it will be your last mistake. Her heart skipped a beat. Who was sending this? Why were they trying to protect her now, when all along, they had been so cryptic and distant? And how did they know about the envelope? Was she the only one who had been targeted, or was there more at play here than she realized? She turned the phone over in her hands, feeling the weight of the decision that lay ahead. She couldn't open it. Not yet. But every instinct in her screamed that she had to do something. The silence outside her apartment, the quiet hum of the city, was suddenly so much more ominous. The feeling of being watched was overwhelming, consuming her every thought. She turned to glance at her front door again, the empty hallway still standing as a cold reminder that she was isolated. Alone in a world that was unraveling faster than she could keep up with. The envelope seemed to burn in her hands now, each second that passed tightening the grip of fear around her chest. She could feel her pulse pounding in her ears. What if she wasn't the only one at risk? What if someone else had already fallen victim to this twisted game? The phone buzzed again, and Emily froze. Her stomach twisted as she looked at the screen. You were warned. Your friend is gone. And now, they're coming for you. The words felt like a blow to the stomach, knocking the wind out of her. Her friend. Alex. Had something happened to him? Was this the price he had paid for being part of this mess? Was it too late for her to get out of it now? Her mind was reeling, the danger growing more real with every passing second. As she turned to open the envelope, she heard a sound that stopped her in her tracks. A knock on the door. This time, she didn't move. Because she already knew who was waiting on the other side. And they weren't there to help. The knock on the door came again, louder this time, more insistent, and Emily's heart pounded in her chest. She was frozen, her eyes wide with terror, every instinct in her screaming to run. But she couldn't move. Not now. The words on her phone still burned in her mind, your friend, he's gone. She couldn't shake the feeling that whatever was coming, it was bigger than just her. She wasn't just in danger anymore, she was part of something far darker than she could have imagined. For a moment, she stood there, her mind racing, trying to piece everything together. Julian's cryptic warning, the strange email, the mysterious car, Alex's sudden disappearance, it all felt like some twisted puzzle she had been forced to play. But the pieces never seemed to fit. Nothing added up. Every time she thought she was close to uncovering the truth, something would happen that pushed her further back into the dark. She glanced at the envelope again, the one Julian had pressed into her hands earlier. The weight of it seemed to grow heavier with every passing second. Was it really the key to everything? Or was it just another trap? She had to know. She couldn't keep going in circles like this, afraid of what might be on the other side. Slowly, almost reluctantly, she tore the seal open, the paper rustling in her trembling hands. But as soon as the envelope was open, she felt a sharp pang of unease. Inside was a single, folded sheet of paper, the edges worn, as though it had been passed around more than once. She unfolded it carefully, her eyes scanning the familiar handwriting. Emily, by the time you read this, it's already too late. You're already caught in the web. You don't know me, but I know you. I've been watching you for a long time, ever since you started asking questions. You think this is about Paris, but it's not. It's about you. You've been chosen for a reason, and now you need to understand the truth. All of it. Her breath caught in her throat. The words were chilling, but it wasn't just the message that unsettled her, it was the handwriting. The familiar slant of the letters, the way the pen had hovered over the paper. She'd seen it before. Alex's handwriting. Her heart skipped a beat. Could it be? Had Alex written this? Was he somehow involved in this mess, deeper than she'd ever known? She reread the letter, searching for more clues, but the message was vague, cryptic, like a puzzle that only made sense to those who already knew the answer. And then, at the bottom of the page, something caught her eye. A name. A name she hadn't heard in years. Julian Harper. It hit her like a ton of bricks. Julian. The same Julian who had shown up at her door. The same Julian who had seemed so helpful, so full of answers, had somehow tied himself to this web of lies. But there was something even more disturbing. Julian was part of this. He wasn't just involved, he had been pulling strings from the very beginning. And the deeper Emily dug, the more she realized that the people she had trusted, Alex, Julian, had all been playing their own game, a game with far higher stakes than she had ever imagined. As she sat there, processing the new layer of deception that had just been unveiled, she heard it. A muffled voice from behind her, low and familiar. Emily. She spun around, her pulse hammering in her ears, to find Alex standing in the doorway, his face drawn, his expression filled with a mixture of guilt and regret. The world seemed to tilt, her breath catching in her chest. He was supposed to be gone. He was supposed to be one of the first victims in this twisted puzzle. But here he was, alive and well, looking more haunted than ever. Alex, what? What is going on? Emily whispered, her voice barely audible. Alex stepped into the room, shutting the door behind him. He looked over at the envelope in her hands, his face tightening with something that could have been fear or anger. You shouldn't have opened it, he said, his voice trembling. You don't understand what you've just triggered. Emily's mind raced. Triggered? Alex, you've been a part of this all along, haven't you? The threats, the lies, everything I've been through. It was all a setup, wasn't it? He flinched, then nodded, his eyes avoiding hers as though he couldn't face her. It wasn't supposed to go this far. I thought I could keep you safe, but I should have known better. They're coming for us both, Emily. I never thought they'd go this far, that they'd drag you into this mess. I'm so sorry. But now, there's no way out. Her head was spinning, her thoughts a blur. The pieces of the puzzle were starting to fit together, but they didn't make sense. Julian. Alex. The threats. The mysterious emails. She had thought she was in control, that she could figure out the truth on her own. But now it was clear, she had never been the one pulling the strings. She had been a pawn all along. And the real players were much more dangerous than she had ever realized. But it wasn't just the men in her life that had deceived her. No. As Emily looked down at the letter again, a sick realization dawned on her. She had been a part of the plan from the very beginning. The strange coincidences, the way things seemed to align just a little too perfectly, it was as if her entire life had been manipulated. She wasn't just being followed. She had been chosen. You need to listen to me, Alex continued, his voice rising with desperation. Julian isn't just a part of this. He's the one behind it all. He's the one who's been orchestrating everything. You weren't just being watched, Emily. You've been groomed. They've been preparing you for something bigger than you could ever imagine. Emily felt the floor drop out from under her. It wasn't just a game anymore. She wasn't just a victim. She was a player. And now, she had to decide whether to keep playing or risk losing everything. Before she could say anything, the doorbell rang again, this time even more urgently than before. But this time, she didn't feel the icy dread of uncertainty. This time, she knew exactly what was coming. And for the first time, she didn't know if she was ready for it. But it didn't matter. Because whoever was at that door, whoever had been watching her all along, had just changed the rules. And she wasn't sure if she would survive the next move. The tension in Emily's apartment was suffocating, the walls seemingly closing in around her as she stared at Alex, unable to reconcile the person standing before her with the one she thought she knew. Every word that had passed between them felt like a carefully constructed lie, a manipulation to draw her deeper into a world she had never asked to be part of. She had trusted him more than anyone, and yet here he was, admitting that he had known the danger all along, had even played a part in creating it. The person she had leaned on the most, the one she thought she could count on when everything else was falling apart, was just as tangled in this web as she was. And now, he was telling her there was no way out. There was no escape from the game they had been pulled into. Alex's eyes, filled with guilt and regret, never left hers, but there was something else in his gaze now, something she couldn't quite place. It was as if he had resigned himself to the truth that had been staring them both in the face for days, weeks even. A truth that neither of them had wanted to accept. Emily's mind raced, the weight of his words hanging over her like a cloud, threatening to crush her. She could feel the pressure in her chest, the way the room seemed to close in around her with every passing second. She was drowning in this, and there was no way to swim to the surface. "You're telling me that I've been a pawn in someone else's game?" Emily's voice was hoarse, barely above a whisper. "That everything, from the beginning, has been designed to get me to this point." Alex's silence spoke volumes. He didn't need to say anything else. She already knew. "I don't know what to say, Emily. I didn't want this. I didn't want any of this for you," Alex said, his voice breaking under the weight of the confession. "But you've been part of something much bigger than either of us. And now they're asking you to make a choice." A cold shiver ran down her spine. "A choice," she repeated, her voice barely a whisper as the realization began to sink in. The truth that Alex had been so desperately trying to protect her from, the truth that she was part of something far more dangerous than she had ever imagined, was becoming clearer with every word. Alex's face twisted in agony as he took a step closer, lowering his voice to a near whisper. "Yes. They're giving you an ultimatum. They want you to decide between your safety and the truth. You can walk away from it all, Emily. You can leave. They'll let you go. But if you do, you'll never know what this was all about. You'll never know who's really behind it. Or, you can dig deeper. Keep going, find out the truth, but in doing so, you risk everything. You risk your life. You risk your future." Emily felt a wave of nausea hit her as she processed his words. The choice seemed impossible. The fear and anxiety that had been building inside her for weeks suddenly became overwhelming, suffocating. Her mind raced through the possibilities. If she left, she could start over, but she would be forever haunted by the unknown, by the questions that had driven her to this point. On the other hand, if she chose to keep digging, she risked everything she had left, her safety, her peace of mind, and perhaps even the people she loved. But the most terrifying part of all was the weight of what Alex was saying. She had trusted him, but now he was telling her that there was no easy way out, no clean resolution. Whatever had been set in motion was bigger than the both of them, and the price of finding the truth might just be too high. The doorbell rang again, sharp and insistent, like the universe was pushing her to make a decision. Emily's heart leapt in her chest, a cold sweat breaking out on the back of her neck. She didn't know if she was ready for what lay behind that door, but she knew, deep down, that she wasn't going to be able to avoid it much longer. "Emily, you have to make a decision," Alex said, his voice quieter now, more urgent. "You have to choose." The sound of the doorbell reverberated in her ears as she stared at Alex, her thoughts swirling in chaos. Everything had led her to this moment, and yet she still didn't know what to do. Every instinct screamed for her to run, to leave the city, to walk away from the life that had become a nightmare. But as she thought about it, something tugged at her, something deeper. The idea of walking away and never knowing the full story, never understanding what had happened to Alex, to her, to all of them, gnawed at her. The curiosity, the need for answers, was suffocating. She had to choose. But was she even capable of making the right decision anymore? Or had she already become too entangled in the lies to escape? The doorbell rang once more forcefully now, and Emily snapped out of her thoughts, her heart pounding in her chest. She looked at Alex one last time, her voice barely a whisper as she made her choice. "What if I want both? What if I want the truth, but I want to survive, too?" Alex's eyes darkened as he took a step back, his face hardening. "That's the problem, Emily. You can't have both. Not anymore." And then, just like that, the room seemed to go still. It was as if time itself had frozen, leaving them suspended in a moment of terrifying uncertainty. Emily felt a surge of panic rise in her chest, her thoughts spinning out of control. The decision she had to make had just become even more impossible, more suffocating. Because deep down, she realized that the only way to truly uncover the truth was to give up everything she had left. And in doing so, she might just lose herself in the process. The knock came again, this time more urgent, more demanding. Alex stepped toward the door, his face twisted in a mixture of fear and regret. He hesitated for just a second before turning back to Emily. "Whatever happens next, just know that I never wanted this for you. But it's too late now. You're already in this. And there's no going back." Emily didn't respond. She couldn't. Because the truth was, she wasn't sure if she wanted to go back. What if finding the truth meant losing herself in the process? What if the cost of uncovering the secrets of the past was too high to pay? The door swung open. And everything she had known or thought she had known was about to change forever. The door swung open with a force that rattled Emily's nerves, and there, standing in the hallway, was someone she never expected to see. Her breath caught in her throat, her stomach twisted with a sharp, visceral recognition. Julian. But not just Julian, there was someone else behind him, someone cloaked in the shadows, their presence chilling and suffocating. Emily's pulse hammered in her ears, and for the first time in what felt like forever, she felt completely exposed, trapped in a web she was too deep in to escape. Julian's expression was unreadable, like a mask he had perfected over years of practice. But there was something in his eyes, a flicker of regret, of realization, that caught her off guard. "You made your choice, Emily," he said, his voice cool, but there was a tremor in it. "And now it's too late." She opened her mouth to respond, but no words came. Everything she thought she knew about the situation, everything she'd been trying to piece together, had just been thrown into chaos. Her mind was scrambling, processing the scene before her, trying to make sense of it. Alex was still standing beside her, his face pale, his hands trembling, but there was a distance between them now, an unspoken acknowledgement that the truth was slipping away, faster than they could catch it. Julian stepped inside without waiting for an invitation, his eyes scanning the room, calculating. "You've been asking too many questions, Emily. Questions that were never meant to be answered. This was never about Paris. It was about you. About all of us." Emily's body tensed, her heart racing. "What are you talking about? What is this about?" she demanded, her voice raw. Alex's face twisted in pain, his eyes flashing with something akin to panic. "You don't understand, Emily. We're all in this. Every single one of us. You, me, Julian, we're all connected, whether we like it or not." Her world tilted. She couldn't breathe. What were they saying? What was happening? They were all connected. The person in the shadows stepped forward, revealing themselves in the dim light. Emily's breath hitched. It was someone she knew, someone she had never suspected could be involved. Her own brother. Daniel. Her thoughts fractured. Daniel. He was part of this, too. All along, he had been there, behind the scenes, watching, waiting. She had trusted him. She had leaned on him when things got tough, confided in him when she felt lost. And now, to find him standing there, eyes cold and calculating, everything she believed was crumbling before her eyes. The realization was a gut punch, the betrayal too much to bear. "You've been playing me, Daniel." Emily's voice cracked. This whole time, you were part of this." Daniel's lips curled into a small, almost pitying smile. "You never asked the right questions, Emily. That's always been your problem." Anger flared inside her chest, hot and sharp. "What the hell is going on? Who's behind all of this? What do you want from me?" Julian stepped forward, his expression grim. "It's bigger than you think, Emily. It's bigger than us. This isn't just about you or your brother or any one of us. This is about power. About control." She shook her head, the pieces refusing to fit. "Power? Control? What does any of this have to do with me?" Daniel's voice was cold, calculated, as he finally spoke, his gaze locking with hers. "It has everything to do with you. Everything. You're the key, Emily. You were always meant to be. The project, the research, the networks, we've been building this for years. And now, you've finally stepped into the role we've been preparing for. All we needed was your participation, your compliance. And now you've made it impossible to back out." Her mind was reeling, each word sinking deeper and deeper into her consciousness. Her whole life, her choices, her relationships, were they all manipulated? She thought back to the moments that had felt off, the strange occurrences, the people who had come and gone, the promises made and broken. Every step had been calculated. Every encounter had been orchestrated. She had been nothing more than a pawn in a much larger game. "Everything. I was just a piece in your game." Emily's voice broke, the weight of the truth crushing her. She looked at Alex, her eyes pleading, but he didn't meet her gaze. His silence screamed louder than any words he could have said. You were never meant to be free, Emily. Not once, Julian said, his voice icy, detached. The invitation to Paris wasn't a gift. It was a test. It was a way to bring you closer, to make sure you played your part. Her head spun, everything falling apart. What do you want from me? She screamed, her voice raw with desperation. Julian's gaze softened for the briefest of moments, but only for a second, before it hardened again. We want you to take control of your role. Accept it, and you'll have power, influence. Deny it, and you'll be nothing but another casualty in a game much larger than you understand. A chill ran down Emily's spine as she realized the full scale of what they were saying. This wasn't just about her. It wasn't just about Paris. It was about something much more dangerous. A global network. A conspiracy that stretched far beyond her. And she was at the center of it. You think I'm just going to play along? She spat, every ounce of defiance rushing to the surface. I'm not going to be your pawn. Daniel's cold eyes flicked toward Julian, who gave a single, imperceptible nod. Before Emily could react, the door slammed shut behind them, and the room seemed to close in on her, the weight of the decision pressing down on her shoulders. There was no way out now. The ultimatum Julian and Daniel had given her wasn't a choice, it was a demand. Accept her fate and align with them, or risk being destroyed by the very system they had built. Her thoughts spun wildly, fear and anger swirling inside her. She could feel the walls closing in, her freedom slipping through her fingers like sand. But what terrified her more than the danger they represented was the haunting realization that she had no idea who she could trust anymore. Everyone she had relied on, everyone she had trusted, was now part of this insidious web of manipulation and control. And in that moment, as the pressure mounted and the silence stretched, Emily knew there was no going back. She had no choice but to fight, to dig deeper into this tangled mess and uncover the truth, no matter the cost. The stakes had never been higher. And the people around her. They weren't just players, they were enemies. And Emily was running out of time to figure out who was going to win. Emily stood in the center of the dimly lit room, her heart pounding in her chest as the pieces of the puzzle came crashing down around her. The adrenaline coursed through her veins, every nerve on edge, every sense heightened as she faced the final confrontation. The conspiracy that had once seemed like a distant, unknowable thing was now here, right in front of her, threatening to swallow her whole. She had followed the trail of lies, the twisted connections, the people who had manipulated her every step of the way, but now, she was standing at the heart of it all. It had all led to this moment, the one where she would uncover the truth, or lose everything she had left. Julian stood across from her, his arms folded, his expression unreadable. Behind him, the shadows seemed to grow deeper, colder. The flickering lights above cast long, distorted shadows on the walls, the silence between them oppressive. Alex was by her side, still trembling, his eyes darting between her and Julian, his earlier confidence now replaced by fear. He had tried to warn her, tried to protect her, but it was too late now. They were all caught in this storm, with no way out. You should have listened, Emily, Julian said, his voice low and calm, but there was an edge to it. All this time, you've been running in circles, digging up things you were never meant to find. And now, it's too late. You think you can just walk away from this? From us? She stood her ground, refusing to let the fear consume her, refusing to back down. The time for questions was over. She knew what she had to do now. She had to find the final piece of the puzzle, the key that would unlock the truth and finally end this nightmare. You don't get it, do you, Julian? Emily's voice rang out, steady and defiant, her gaze locked on him. You've been playing this game for too long, but you didn't count on me. You didn't count on me refusing to play by your rules. So what is this really about? What is this whole thing, this conspiracy, really about? Julian's eyes darkened, and for a brief moment, something flickered in his expression, anger, frustration, maybe even fear. But it was gone as quickly as it had come, replaced by a cold, calculating mask. You still don't get it. It's not just about power. It's about control. We've been building this for years, pulling the strings, moving people like pawns on a chessboard. And you, Emily, You were always going to be a part of it. You were always going to be the key to unlocking it all. The words hit her like a slap to the face, and for a moment, everything inside her seemed to freeze. She had known that there were things she hadn't understood, things she couldn't quite put together, but this was something far darker than she could have imagined. They had been planning this for years, orchestrating everything behind the scenes, manipulating her and everyone she had trusted for one singular purpose. She was nothing more than a cog in their grand machine. But then, something clicked inside her, a realization so sharp and sudden it made her breath catch in her throat. She wasn't just a pawn. She wasn't just a tool to be used and discarded. She was the one who could bring it all down. The piece of evidence she had been searching for all this time, the one thing that could destroy everything they had built, was within her reach. And it wasn't just about the Paris invitation. It wasn't just about the people who had betrayed her, or the lies they had fed her. It was about the data, the records, the encrypted files she had uncovered months ago, the ones that connected her family to the shadowy organization they had been running from. She reached into her bag, her hands shaking as she pulled out the device. The files were on it, everything she needed to expose them, to expose the entire conspiracy. The faces, the names, the deals they had made, the plans they had set in motion. It was all there. And it was about to be unleashed. You think you have the power, don't you? Julian sneered, his eyes narrowing as he saw what she was holding. But you're just as trapped as the rest of us. You don't know how deep this goes. You don't understand what you're dealing with. Emily's lips curled into a cold, bitter smile. I understand enough. You've spent all this time hiding behind shadows, pulling strings, manipulating people. But I'm not afraid of you anymore. And I'm not afraid of your little empire. The tension in the room thickened, the air heavy with the weight of their confrontation. She could feel the walls closing in, the danger escalating with each passing second. But there was no turning back now. She had the evidence. She had the power to end it all. Julian's face twisted in fury, his patience wearing thin. You think you can expose us? You think you can take us down with your little files? You have no idea what you're up against. Emily stepped forward, holding the device out in front of her, the final weapon in her hands. I know exactly what I'm up against. And I know I'm not the one who's going to lose. Without warning, Julian lunged forward, his hand shooting out to grab the device from her. But Emily was faster. She stepped back, her heart racing as she swiped the screen of her phone, unlocking the encrypted files in front of her. The device buzzed, the data syncing with a secure server, sending everything she had uncovered straight to the authorities. Julian's eyes widened, realizing too late what she had done. No. You can't. But it was already over. The moment the data hit the server, the game had changed. The conspiracy they had spent years building was exposed. All the lies, the manipulation, the deaths, they were going to be uncovered. No one was going to be able to hide anymore. And then, in the chaos of it all, as the truth began to leak out, the unexpected twist came. A familiar voice echoed from behind her. Not so fast, Emily. She spun around to find Daniel standing in the doorway, a gun in his hand, his expression cold and unreadable. You've made a mistake. You think exposing them will stop everything, but you're wrong. You don't understand the bigger picture. Her stomach dropped. The betrayal had gone deeper than she ever imagined. Daniel wasn't just involved. He was the one orchestrating it all. In that moment, the weight of everything, every lie, every betrayal, every sacrifice, crashed down on her. There was no way out now. The final battle wasn't just about the truth. It was about survival. Emily, Daniel said, his voice colder than ever. You should have stayed out of this. Now you've ruined everything. The gun raised. But Emily wasn't afraid anymore. She wasn't running anymore. With one last move, she reached for the gun in his hand, her fingers slipping around it as the struggle erupted. Everything that had led them here, the lies, the secrets, the trust that had been broken, was coming to a head in that single, heart-pounding moment. And as the final shot rang out, the truth was exposed for the world to see. But the cost of that truth was more than anyone could have ever anticipated. The world had shifted beneath Emily's feet in ways she never thought possible, and as the dust settled in the aftermath of the chaos, She stood alone in a room filled with broken promises, shattered trust, and the weight of everything she had uncovered. The authorities had come, the conspiracy unraveled, and the people who had been controlling her, manipulating her, were now facing the consequences of their actions. Julian, Daniel, and the others were now just pieces in a much larger puzzle, their reign over her shattered, their plans exposed for the world to see. Yet, despite the relief that came with knowing justice was being served, a gnawing emptiness lingered within her. What was it all for? Was this what victory looked like? She sat by the window, watching the city below as the first rays of sunlight broke through the horizon. For the first time in months, she felt the weight on her shoulders lighten, just a little. The storm inside her mind had finally started to calm, but the ripples were still there, moving through her thoughts. She had fought for the truth, for the people she loved, and for herself, but at what cost? Her heart was still heavy with the realization that the world she had once known, the world she had fought to protect, was never the same. People she had once trusted were now gone, their faces forever changed by the darkness she had exposed. And she was left to pick up the pieces, to rebuild her life from the rubble of the wreckage. She had never wanted any of this. She never wanted to become entangled in a conspiracy so vast, so far-reaching that it seemed impossible to even grasp the full scope of it. But somehow, she had been pulled into its orbit, and now she couldn't ignore the question that had been haunting her all along: was she really free? Or was she simply a product of the same system she had fought against? The truth had come out, the files had been sent, and the people behind the conspiracy were being held accountable. But as the shadows of her past and the ghosts of her relationships began to fade, Emily knew one thing for certain: she could never fully outrun what had happened. Not the lies. Not the betrayals. And not the choices she had made. Her phone buzzed on the table beside her, and she stared at it for a long moment before picking it up. It was a message from Alex, the one person who had stood by her through it all. The message was simple, just 3 words, but it hit her like a punch to the gut. "We need to talk." She felt her heart race as she read it again, the weight of those words sinking in. What did he want? What did he need to say? Had he been a part of it all along? No, she couldn't go back to those doubts. She couldn't let herself be consumed by the what ifs. The truth was out there, and she had seen it with her own eyes. The people who had been behind the conspiracy were finally facing the consequences. But there was still so much she didn't know. So many unanswered questions. The mystery hadn't ended with the exposure of the files. It hadn't ended with the fall of the people who had held so much power over her. Because the more she thought about it, the more she realized that the true nature of the conspiracy had never been fully revealed. Yes, the data had been sent. Yes, the truth had come to light. But there were still gaps, still things that didn't make sense. The pieces of the puzzle didn't fit together the way they should have. Who else had been involved? And what were they really after? The answers were still out there, lurking in the shadows, waiting to be discovered. And no matter how much she wanted to walk away from it all, Emily knew deep down that she couldn't. Not yet. The soft click of her front door opening startled her, and she turned quickly, her breath catching in her throat as she saw Alex standing in the doorway. His face was unreadable, his eyes shadowed with the weight of everything they had been through. He didn't say anything at first, just stood there, watching her, his presence filling the room with a tension that was impossible to ignore. For a moment, they just stared at each other, the air thick with unspoken words, with things neither of them knew how to say. Finally, Alex stepped inside, closing the door behind him, and without a word, he took a seat across from her. "I don't know what to say, Emily," he said quietly, his voice strained. "I don't know if we can fix what happened, or if we even should. But I think we both know the truth. We've both been a part of something we don't fully understand. And there's no going back now. No matter how much we want to." She felt a lump form in her throat at his words. They were both broken in their own ways, both changed by everything that had happened, by the choices they had made, and by the truth they had uncovered. But there was something unspoken between them, a bond forged in the fire of their shared struggle. Even though everything had fallen apart, even though they had been dragged into this nightmare together, Emily knew that, somehow, they would find a way to move forward. But just as she was about to respond, her phone buzzed again. This time, it was an alert from the authorities, an update on the investigation. The words she read made her blood run cold. The conspiracy had only scratched the surface. The people responsible for the network they had uncovered were already making moves to cover their tracks, to erase the evidence before it could be used against them. The fight wasn't over. It was only just beginning. "Emily, you know what this means, don't you?" Alex asked, his voice barely above a whisper, his eyes wide with the realization of what they were up against. She nodded slowly, feeling a chill crawl down her spine. "Yeah. It's not over." They were standing at the edge of a new chapter, one that promised more danger, more questions, and more uncertainty. But Emily had learned one thing over the course of this journey: she wasn't afraid of the unknown anymore. The truth, no matter how dark or complicated, was something she could handle. And whatever came next, she would face it head-on. As the sun rose higher in the sky, casting light over the city she once thought she knew, Emily finally understood something that had eluded her for so long. Peace wasn't something you found. It was something you fought for, every single day. And as long as the shadows of the past hung over her, she would keep fighting. With one final glance at Alex, she made her decision. It wasn't over. Not by a long shot. But somehow, that made her feel more alive than she ever had before. And as the camera zoomed out, leaving them standing together in the aftermath of everything, the final words on the screen appeared: "Some truths are never fully revealed. Some battles never truly end." The story may have finished for now, but the mystery was still out there waiting, just beyond the horizon. And so were they. And that was the real truth of it all.